Hello. The one thing that really makes me angry these days is when I read the comments of various people on discussion forums stating that it's people like myself who deny the existence of a pandemic that are causing this lockdown to be extended. If only people like myself would shut up and everyone would just keep the rules, stay at home, wear a mask everywhere, we'd be out of this quickly. This gets to me because this has no basis in fact. The lockdown is not something that had to happen. It's not some inevitable result because of a pandemic. It is the government that has imposed it upon us when they could have taken a different approach, such as that suggested in the Great Barrington Declaration, signed by over 50,000 medical professionals. And the thing is, with that line of reasoning that I described, it enables the tyranny to go on indefinitely for another 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. People putting up with it without pushback because they believe that's what we need to do to get our lives back. Well, when in history has this happened? When in history have we an example of a government that performs a massive power grab against its own people in claiming there's an emergency, only just to voluntarily relinquish that power in a few months or a few years' time when the emergency is over? It doesn't happen. And the trouble is, this line of reasoning is being directed not by facts and evidence, but by the psychological warfare operation that this government have carried out against its own people. In fact, some psychologists are starting to realise this. Here we have an article in the Daily Express. The government has been accused of using covert strategies to keep people in a perpetual state of heightened fear to make them obey COVID-19 restrictions. A group of 47 psychologists has claimed this amounts to a strategic decision to inflate the fear levels of the British public, which it states is ethnically murky and has left people too afraid to leave their homes for medical appointments. Led by former NHS consultant psychologist Dr. Gary Sidley, the experts have written to the British Psychological Society claiming the strategy is morally questionable. You also have an example with the Advertising Standards Agency, and there have been some complaints. Apparently they picked up on an advert that the government were forced to discontinue, which claimed that joggers and dog walkers are highly likely to have COVID, and therefore jogging and dog walking is some sort of a dangerous activity. So there are people out there who are starting to cotton on to this propaganda campaign. But that's the thing. So many people are basing their sincerely held beliefs about this virus and what we need to do collectively to stop it, the communitarian groupthink, not based on evidence, not based on any sound reasoning, but based upon the applied behavioural psychology, the psychological warfare, which the government have stated from the horse's mouth that they are using. And they are stated, the SAGE report, March the 22nd, 2020, it states specifically that they are exaggerating the threat. They have told you it's from the horse's mouth. Now, by contrast, I would like to tell you what, if you want me to believe that the government really cares about us, they care about our health, they have our best interests at heart, I would like to tell you how they would be communicating with the people and what I'd expect. Currently, at our press briefings, we have good news and bad news alternating with each other. And what this is doing, it's a psychological trick to kind of get people into a state of confusion, of despair, of hopelessness. There is so much psychology being waged against the people going on. They know it. The behavioural insights team, they know how to manipulate the people. And this really is very similar to torture tactics, giving people a bit of hope, having one headline saying, there was one today saying we may be able to ease restrictions from mid-February, but there's others that are saying we're having lockdown to the summer and people being swung back and forth having no certainty. This is what I would expect from the government, and if they want me to have any trust in them at all, then this is what I expect at the very least. And this applies largely to their press briefings. Okay, so here we go. Number one, The government must prove the existence of the SARS Cov-2 virus. They prove it exists, and they need to prove that its prevalence is so significant that it constitutes a public health emergency. Don't just use fear tactics, prove statistically that this is the case. Secondly, you need to prove to us that all the restrictions you're imposing upon us, lockdowns, social distancing, masks and everything else, are absolutely necessary and appropriate to mitigate a public health emergency. And that if we don't have those things, we are going to see an excess number of deaths and casualties. And thirdly, you need to be clear about what is the goal of lockdown and everything that you're doing. We need a clear, definitive, achievable, measurable, specific and fixed goal with no wriggle room for moving the goalposts. It's got to be a fixed goal. And I expect at your press briefings every day, rather than going through this good news, bad news, good news, bad news, roundabout, all that sort of thing, always vague suggestions and all that thing, that if we do the right thing, we'll get through it, and if we vaccinate enough people, etc. I expect you to be telling us how we are achieving that goal. How close are we? Set your eyes fixed on that goal and show the people how close we are to achieving that goal. And that goal must be fixed. And the goal must not involve vaccination. Because even if you are just saying that we need to have, by just saying we need to have a vaccine, for instance, you are coercing people into taking a medical intervention in order to get your freedoms back. It's saying you're in prison, you're locked up, you're restricted until you take, or many people take, this medical intervention. And even if it's not compulsory, the idea that we need to roll this out to a certain number of people is going to lead to people feeling coerced into taking this rushed, experimental medical intervention for which the pharmaceutical companies who've produced it are free from liability. Yes, you can get a bit of money from the government, that's through the taxpayer, but the pharmaceutical companies, the manufacturers, are free from liability. That's not an acceptable goal, and there must be absolutely no coercion given to the public in achieving and meeting your goal. And fourthly, the government needs to make themselves accountable and bind themselves to that goal. They need to prove to us that this is genuinely about our health and that this is not a power grab. And they need to do it by doing something like saying a referendum or a general election a year after they announce the emergency and saying, look, if you're not happy with the way we're doing this, if you don't like the way we're doing it, if you'd rather let the virus run ribbon, let nature take its course, then we are going to hold this vote. And whatever you say, we're going to be bound for it. And you can kick us out of office if you don't like the way we're doing it. They make themselves personally accountable and bind themselves to that goal so we can have an absolute guarantee and assurance, all of us who are concerned, that this is not a power grab, this is not about bringing in the New World Order, this is genuinely about our health, and it is a strictly temporary health crisis, and the restrictions are strictly temporary. If the government have our best interests at heart and genuinely wants us to get back to normal, I will expect nothing less than what I've just described. And maybe, just maybe, I might start to trust them a little bit. And maybe, just maybe, I might start to believe this notion that if we keep all the rules, then it will go, then that's the way back to normal. But they need to do their bit. They need to prove there's a public health emergency, and they need to prove to us that they are genuinely working for our best interests. And they need to prove to us, if they don't want us to believe the conspiracy theories, that this is a strictly temporary health crisis, that all of this is temporary, that they have our best interests at heart, this is not going to be a power grab, and they bind themselves to those decisions, and they bind themselves to getting us back to normal. I expect nothing less. So if you're one of those people that thinks we just need to suck it up, well, ask yourself the question, why aren't we seeing what I've just described? Thank you very much for watching.